that. And when the conversation kind of winds down and we do our Q&A, we're going to go ahead and present those to Dan at the end of the evening. So, so to get started for this evening, I would like to welcome our very own Managing Supervisor for the Jewish Family Services, Sherry Bernstein. Sherry? We need you off mute, Sherry.
Mute.
There Sherry is. There's Sherry.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jewish Book Festival, Toledo Jewish Book Festival. Tonight, we're discussing the book that's titled As Needed for Pain by Dan Perez, and it's a memoir about his struggles with addiction. The book pulls absolutely no punches about this topic, and it's down to earth, meaningful for anyone trying to understand a story about the opioid industry and its victims. And I just want to welcome Dan Perez and thank him for being with us here tonight. And I guess the first question I have for you, Dan, is how does it feel to be talking about this topic?
Well, first of all, hi, everybody. I'm so happy to be here. Second of all, I've done a number of these, and this is the first time I've done it where I can actually see faces of the people that are listening to this conversation, and I'm super grateful for that. It's so nice to see everybody. So how does it feel to be talking about it? It feels great. You know, I mean, I'm incredibly grateful to have the opportunity to share my story. And if I'm being honest, and you want honesty, right?
Yes.
I'm incredibly grateful to be alive today. And I shouldn't be here, and I am here. And I feel a lot of gratitude for that.
That makes a lot of sense. And I'm glad that you're here too, because a lot of addicts aren't making it, especially today. We keep hearing the toll increasing, especially even during these times because of the disconnect, but we can talk about that a little bit later. Your book is kind of a recount of your life as an addict. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I sure can. You know, listen, my story is uniquely mine, and there are a number of things in my story that make it unique to me, and I'm happy to get into them. But first, I think it's important to acknowledge, for as unique as my story is, it's also an incredibly common story, and I think that's as you mentioned, that's the big issue that we're facing today. I mean, we're facing lots of issues, certainly, but the opioid epidemic is devastating this country and really devastating whole communities in this country. But my story is common in that I injured myself doing something stupid to try to impress a woman. You know, men have done the darndest things over the years to impress women, and I think the desire to impress women explains a lot of motorcycles and leather jackets and tattoos and, you know, fedoras and all sorts of other things. In my case, I inexplicably, quite frankly, did a cartwheel to try to impress a woman. I'd never done a cartwheel before, and I have never done one since because I didn't stick the landing on this one, as they say, and I came crashing down and injured my back. Needless to say, I didn't impress this woman. And I ended up ultimately really injuring my back. I was in my 20s, and I had to have back surgery and was prescribed Vicodin, which is an opioid, and that was the beginning of what turned into, at least at first, a love affair, and then ultimately a nightmare for me. But I had an interesting career at the time. I was working in publishing in New York City, and ultimately ended up being the editor-in-chief or running a major national magazine, and I was traveling a lot, and I was, you know, surrounded by all sorts of interesting people, and all I cared about were these pills and getting them and taking them and getting more of them. And it was a bumpy road. You know, I was like so many people in this country, so many people in the communities that we live in. I was an addict hiding in plain sight. And I was able really quite easily to get away with it because I didn't look like a drug addict. You know, I mean, at least not then. And this was before the opioid crisis was a crisis, and I was able to take full advantage of my white privilege and walk into doctors' offices and walk into pharmacies and be taken seriously. But my addiction was like, it was like lighting a fuse on a stick of dynamite. It was just absolutely brutal and terrifying, and it brings us full circle to the gratitude that I feel for being here today and being able to talk about my experiences.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, I understand the whole progression of it because I know myself when I harmed my back, how easy it was to get Flexerol and Vicodin and start with, you know, one Vicodin. Next thing you know, I'm taking two. And next thing you know, I'm taking three. And then I'm saying, wait a minute, I probably need to flush these down the toilet because I knew as a substance abuse counselor where it could lead. Luckily, I was not actually victim to that, but I've seen so many people over and over again just through the medical industry. So it kind of speaks to the pharmaceutical industry in and of itself with regard to that and the ease, you know, that we create addicts today.
It does. I mean, I think it's a little bit of a slippery slope, and certainly it was for me. I think that you know, listen, I may be unique in the fact that I believe in the efficacy of these pills. I believe in the need for these pills, and I believe and I hope that now in 2020 it is much more difficult to do what I did when I was an active addict, beginning really in the late 90s. I hope it's much harder or even impossible to do what I did now. But what happened back then, and we're seeing this now with this massive, I think, $8 billion settlement from Purdue and other manufacturers of drugs like this, the pharmaceutical companies, you know, waged and spent hundreds of millions of dollars on marketing, or what they called educating the medical community to sort of think and understand that these drugs, which initially were really just developed for end-of-life care, things like that, to convince them that these drugs had broader uses. And of course, they minimalized, they really downplayed the addictive qualities of these drugs. And so I would see doctors. I was a doctor shopper, so I would go to, at any given point, I would go to maybe 4 or 5 doctors a month, and I would get massive amounts of painkillers from them. So while you talked about taking one and then maybe taking another and then potentially a third, I was taking 15 at a time, about 4 times a day. So I was taking 60 extra strength Vicodin a day. Now, to put that into perspective, a single tablet of extra strength Vicodin is the active ingredient, which is hydrocodone, which is your codeine, that's the opiate. And then there's also acetaminophen in there. So it's the equivalent of taking an extra strength Tylenol and codeine together. So in addition to putting all of those opiates in my body, I was essentially taking a small bottle of extra strength Tylenol every day for years. And again, and I will always keep coming back to gratitude. The fact that I am here today, the fact that I'm a healthy man today, is a miracle in my view. You know, but I was doctor shopping, and back then I could literally go in the same medical office building to one doctor on one floor on a Monday, and on a Tuesday to another doctor on another floor, and come away with the same prescription, and go to one pharmacy on that Monday after the first appointment and fill it, and go to a pharmacy directly across the street on the Tuesday, and fill the second prescription. There was no no red flags went up when things like that happened, and certainly the pharmaceutical industry knew that and took advantage of that. But while I think that they're complicit, of course, and I think to some degree the medical community is as well, I don't blame anyone. You know, I made choices, and I mean, it got to where it was a runaway train careening off the tracks, but I made choices along the way, and I very readily accept responsibility. And quite frankly, if I could go back and do it all over again, I wouldn't change anything. This has been my journey, and I'm okay. I'm okay with that.
You know, that's awesome that you speak that. And I'm sitting here thinking of like 3 different things. So I'm going to try to remember each one. One, you have to kind of believe that there's a higher purpose for you, because the fact that you are sitting here with us is a miracle. I mean, what you could have done to your liver just with the Tylenol alone and everything else, on top of those drugs that literally are just putting you to sleep on a regular basis. You're here. That's wonderful. Perhaps this is your purpose. And we could talk a little bit more about that, as far as writing a book and, you know, probably reaching out, especially into communities like ours where things are still swept under the rug with regard to substance abuse. The other thing I wanted to ask, maybe before we went on and talked about that, was, you know, were you ever reduced to, you know, having to seek pills in a place other than a pharmacy?
Oh yeah, yes, I was.
Tell us what that
Listen, when you start taking as many pills as I was taking, it's very difficult to maintain that supply, because well, first of all, you eventually have to start taking more and more and more and more to try to attain that high that you really can't ever attain again after, you know, the first couple of times. So you're chasing something that you're never going to get to anyway. But yes, I had been invited to go on the Bill Maher show. Back then, he was doing Politically Incorrect, and now he does a different show, I think on HBO. But back then, he was doing Politically Incorrect, and I had been invited on to his show, and which tapes in LA, and I flew out and to the West Coast and went to San Diego first and rented a car and drove down to Tijuana. I had about $8,000 in cash in my pockets, and found a morally flexible pharmacist who would sell me pills, and I bought 1,000 Vicodin and put them in the trunk of a rental car and drove them over the border. What I didn't realize at the time was that as you approach the U.S. border, there are these drug sniffing dogs there with Border Patrol agents, and so I'm sitting in this car, and I have to get from where I am up to LA and go on this television show in a matter of hours. And I'm like, oh my God, like, you know, can these dogs smell pills? And I just had this like panicked moment. And it's in moments like this where you're, you know, I think in my mind, everything's racing through my mind. Oh my God, I'm going to miss the Bill Maher show. Oh my God, my poor mother, she's going to like, this is going to like absolutely crush her. And you could almost hear my heart beating as this Border Patrol agent came up to my car with a dog on a leash and ultimately kept going and passed me, you know. Yeah, I've had so many moments like that where I OD'd and I woke up with someone literally on my chest trying to wake me up, or I mean, any number of things. I had this experience with Mike Tyson on the roof of a building where it was an incredibly hot day. It was actually Yom Kippur, and it was a like oppressively hot September day, and I was meeting him on the roof of a building in Harlem where he kept these pigeons, and we were having this conversation, and it was just the two of us, and I was wearing a suit, which felt like a good idea in the morning when I put it on, but by the time I got up to that building and the sun was right above and these birds were like whirling around above us, it was like something out of like a horrible Hitchcock film, and I got so dizzy I almost fell over. I mean, literally felt like I had just taken a punch from Mike Tyson, and I ended up getting sick, and you know, these things happen, you know. And you think logically, oh, okay, anyone that goes through that or feels like they're almost about to get arrested or almost dies multiple times or almost, you know, stumbles off the roof of a building because you're so dizzy in front of like a former heavyweight champion of the world, that you think, okay, this guy's going to learn his lesson and get his shit together. Feel sorry, folks, but I didn't. I never did, you know, because that's the way addicts are wired. Like, as long as I didn't die, I was okay. I would literally think to myself some nights, the last handful of pills that I would take on any given day was the biggest handful of pills that I would take that day. And that was the like extra hit that I felt like I needed to help knock me out for the night. So if I was taking 14 or 15 at a time, I might take 17 or 18 at bedtime. And I would think, as I like took 2 more out of the bottle and put them in my hand, I would think, all right, this actually might kill me. And then I would take them. So the addiction is so powerful, and it so dominates your life that rational thinking doesn't register, you know, and which again takes us back to gratitude, right? Like I'm here and I'm able to share this story. But it was bad, yes. And oh, sorry, one other thing. I found a limo driver in LA. There's always a limo driver in LA who can get you whatever you want. And this guy could get me pills. And so I would go out to LA all the time on business and pay this limo driver to get me pills. And so I was seeing doctors. I'd been to Tijuana. And then ultimately I had this like drug dealing limo driver who like became my best friend.
Yeah. You know, just going back to speaking to the whole concept of the only objective in life feels like getting the next high, you know, while everything else is in the background, it takes a back seat to your life. And so, you know, again, and it just attests that, hey, you're here, and how awesome. So speaking to that whole thing about maybe a higher purpose, you know, you wrote this book. You know, actually, I think you said the book that I read that you got clean in 2007, and you wrote the book approximately 10 years later. Why that time gap, and why did you write the book?
Okay, so good questions. Right, I got sober in 2007. I just celebrated 13 years of sobriety, which is, you know, amazing. My kids have only ever known me as a sober dad. And I'm incredibly grateful for that. I'm sure they are too. I think, you know, there's a really significant stigma associated with addiction today, and we'll wrap into that alcoholism also, because it's also, I think, a really powerful stigma associated with that as well. And so when I got sober, you know, look, as an active addict, I did everything I could to protect my secret. My secret was that I was an addict. And addicts are just phenomenal liars. I mean, just like first-rate liars. And I was no different. And so I did everything I could to make sure that no one knew that I had this problem. People around me certainly knew that something was not right, but I don't think they knew that I was a drug addict. And so when I got sober, I didn't want to be associated with the stigma. And I will say, and I'm happy to talk about this, but I want to circle back to your question. I wanted to get sober years before I did. And I tried many, many times on my own, which is really close to impossible to do. Meaning it's hard to get sober on your own. But I was scared to raise my hand and ask for help because I didn't want anyone to know that I was a drug addict. So after I got sober in 2007 and I became a father, I had this kind of high-profile media job, and I just was like, you know what, I'm going to focus on my recovery. I'm going to focus on my job. I'm going to focus on fatherhood. I'm going to focus on trying to save and repair my marriage, which ultimately I wasn't able to do. But I was going to work on all those things and keep this a secret. It wasn't until, maybe almost 10 years later, where even longer, where I was like, I have stories I think that I want to share. And I just started writing stuff down. I was actually in Israel. I was at the Tel Aviv Hilton, and I was on the balcony, and was no longer married at the time, and was just away. And I looked down. I have this amazing saltwater pool there. It's right on the ocean too. It's really lovely. And I saw these old men swimming in the pool. And it triggered an unbelievably powerful memory for me. So when I was growing up in Baltimore, my family belonged to a country club, and we would go to this country club. I would go with my grandmother, who incidentally turns 103 next month. I mean, she's absolutely like a total rock star. She's amazing. So I would go with my grandmother to the country club to play tennis when I was a young boy. And then I would stay for a swim, and she would sit and watch me swim. But early in the morning, the pool was designated for lap swimmers. And these old men would be in the pool, and they would move very slowly, like punching at the water like exhausted prize fighters as they went. And when I was up on this balcony in Tel Aviv and looked down at the pool, that's what I saw. And suddenly I was like smacked in the face with this memory. And so I just started writing about it. And eventually that became a chapter in my book. And so I didn't set out to write about it, but I'm really grateful that I did. When I was, I really feel like I'm babbling on. Feel free to jump in at any point, by the way. Although everyone seems to still be awake.
I think it's fantastic. All of it is fantastic.
I wasn't fishing for that, but thank you. When I was an active addict, I would read books like this, like mine, read books about people that were in recovery, and they gave me hope. They didn't get me sober, but they gave me hope that there was a path out. And so, go ahead.
I just think that a part of what you're talking about, and probably where that whole thing with the old men swimming and the memoir and everything built around that makes you human to the rest of the world. It pulls in that humanity. It makes people look at you, okay, boom, this is what I was thinking about. And, instead of just talking about addiction, you're talking about, all right, this is me as a child. These are things that were important to me. These are things that have warmth for me. Because really, when we talk about addiction, I kind of have this theory, as do others. There's this whole disconnect. It's like a disconnect with everything that is important to us. And so what we're searching for is a wholeness, or to feel whole, or a reconnection. And maybe that's exactly what it is that you're talking about when you talk about that memoir really just flushing you in that moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the reason there are elements of my childhood and adolescence in the book is because I think they really help contextualize who I was when I became an addict. And I was the kid that never felt like he fit in with the other guys. I was the younger brother, still am, but I was the younger brother of the town star. My brother, who is just one of the kindest, sweetest, most loving people I know, and my best friend. My brother was a star athlete, Ivy League student, had girls swarming all over him. And I was like the kid brother, and I was never as social. I was never as athletic. I was never as academically gifted. And so I just never felt like I fit in. And when I write about that experience at the country club as a young boy, it's really framed around being in the locker room. And I write about standing in this. Now, when I was like at a certain age, my grandmother could take me into the women's locker room with her still, right? And I could change, and all of her, old lady friends would come over to me and pinch my cheeks and kiss me, and it would just like a horrifying experience, and very traumatizing for a young boy. They'd like lipstick smeared across their teeth, or worse, they were like in the process of changing. It's just not what I needed to see at 5 or 6 or 7. But when I was 8, I had kind of aged out of being able to be taken into the women's locker room. So this was like my first experience in the men's locker room. And I remember it so vividly. I saw a group of men standing together in between a bunch of lockers, and one of them was completely naked, except he was holding a small cigar, like the nub of a cigar. And I just remember thinking, oh my God, when I would change at summer camp, I would twist and contort myself and hide and do things. Here's this guy who has like all the confidence in the world. He couldn't care less, standing there talking to his friends naked. And it just made me think, like, I struggled with confidence. I struggled to fit in. I felt like everyone had been given a manual, every boy, every girl, every man, every woman, on how to live life. But they had run out when they got to me, right? So I never had this manual. And so when I talk about my childhood, when I talk about being a teenager, and my early college days and things like that, it's just to contextualize this hole that I felt, right? That I didn't feel complete. I wasn't comfortable with who I was, and didn't know who I was, and was steeped in anxiety and insecurity and so many other things that if you spend any time in around other people in recovery, are very common. Listen, they're very common with everyone, but they really are sort of prevailingly common with people in recovery. And so it was important for me. But that moment with these guys swimming in Israel, it's just one of those things where you're like, you can hear a song or smell a smell, or look at a photo, and a whole memory comes just brushing past you. It blows your hair back, and that's what this was like for me.
Yeah, something meaningful came out of that. Absolutely. Absolutely. So in Toledo right now, we're working on a resiliency initiative to kind of spend more time talking about addiction and mental illness. We have the objective to kind of put together some focus groups, get people dialoguing so that we can destigmatize these issues and make them easier to talk about, because therein lies the issue. Again, as you spoke of, these things happen with everybody, these feelings, the incomplete, but for some reason with addiction, it's like one pill the switch might, hit and it just takes off for some people, and that becomes their coping mechanism in terms of how they deal with any feelings. So
Sorry, forgive me. I don't mean to talk over you. I just think, I think if I, to get back to the question as to why I wrote the book, well, listen, aside from the sort of extraordinary wealth and all of the women and all of those exciting things that come, no, I'm joking. It's an important story to share. And I think if we can destigmatize, to your point, I think we need to focus on education and prevention and treatment, right? And we need to destigmatize this disease. And it is a disease. And that's not me saying it. It's categorized as such by the American Medical Association. This is not a moral failing.
No.
This is part of the human condition, and it's a disease. But it cannot be easier in this country to get the pills than it is to get the treatment. And that's where we are right now. It's easier to get the drug than it is to get treatment in many, many parts of this country. And so initiatives like the one you just spoke of, I think are incredibly important. And I think having an understanding that, because listen, addiction touches many lives, and you're hard pressed to find someone in this country that is either not dealing with this themselves, has a family member that is dealing or has dealt with it, or knows someone in the community or in their office or somehow connected to them in their life that is dealing with it in some way. And so to destigmatize it and to talk about it and to write about it and share about it, feels like the appropriate time to do that, so I went for it.
absolutely. And I'm really grateful that you did. And I know we're at that point where we're going to have to wind down and start answering some questions. So I'm going to first really thank you thoroughly for everything that you've talked.
Gosh, thank you.
For being here, for sharing with us, actually that snapshot too of you, that's a really intimate snapshot of who you are, your walk in life and the journey that you've been on. And I'm really appreciative for it. And I am glad that you made it and that you're here to talk about it. And I want to add to that, we're gonna, let's see, I have to thank Jewish Federation and Foundation of Greater Toledo for making this possible tonight. Through their generous support. And if any of you are on social media at all, please follow the Federation Facebook page and look for the book festival post. And also you can join us on the Midwest Jewish chat, because we're going to be dialoguing about these issues more often in a less formal basis. And again, thank you, Dan. You're awesome.
Thank you so much.
And thank you to those of you that joined us tonight from the community.
So if anybody has any questions, comments, please feel free to put them in the chat box. We do have a comment. I have heard that there are people who seem to have the genetics in addition to, while others are able to take a round of pills and not have the dire result. Do you know if you might have had that genetic that pushed you to need these pills?
That's a great question. And, as far as I know, and think of when I say what I'm about to say, think of how extraordinary it would be if we were able to test for addiction and alcoholism, the way we can test for other illnesses. So I don't know with certainty, but I'm fairly confident that I was predisposed to addiction. And so if it hadn't been the cartwheel that led to the back surgery, it probably would have been something else that led me to this.
Uh-oh. Dan froze.
Like kind of within visibility, can only look back so far, but I'm just getting something that says my internet connection is unstable. Can you all see me okay?
You froze for a second, but we're good now.
it was probably just at the moment where I was saying something incredibly profound, but
Of course.
I'm sure I was predisposed for this. And listen, I'm a drug addict. You know, I say that with neither shame nor pride, but I am a drug addict in recovery. I certainly am proud of that, and I just think that this is part of my makeup.
How were you able to be so successful in your high-powered career while so heavily addicted?
Here's the thing. I'm brilliant. And so I was, no, I have no idea. I listen, I think we're great con artists, addicts, you know, and we were able to, you know, really do a lot of misdirection, right? And I think I was very good at that. I loved what I did, and I do still do it. So I love what I do for a living, but you know, I don't know. I mean, some people have referred to me as a high functioning addict. I don't believe that I was a high functioning addict. I think I was a hot mess. But I was working in a world where people accept eccentricities from people in you know, powerful positions. I mean, look at all the weirdness. Look at the Elon Musks of the world. Like, people are like kind of bizarre, right? But like, you're like, oh, okay, he's doing a really cool stuff. So, you know, and so I just think people weren't paying attention or looked the other way. But I don't know how I got to where I was, or how I managed to hold on to my job, but I did.
Another question, in a weird way, do you miss it, the highs and etc.?
I don't miss it at all. Um, I think about it all the time. My recovery is and my sobriety are, you know, really important to me, and a huge part of my life. But I don't miss it. I had forgotten long before I even got sober how good it felt in the first place. And it really just became a matter of not getting sick. Because when you run out of pills, when you stop doing these drugs, there are, you know, acute symptoms of withdrawal. If you've ever seen a movie where they portray someone going through like a heroin withdrawal, it's the same exact thing, the exact same thing. So you want to jump out of your skin, you're sweating, you're hot, you're freezing, you're irritable, you're vomiting, you're a mess, and everything aches, and it's just hell on earth. And so after a while, I just kept taking them to avoid that. You know, I wasn't feeling the high. I mean, I was, but I wasn't feeling the high that I had originally felt. So I don't miss any of it. But I remember all of it. And there's the difference. Like, I don't miss it, I don't crave it, I don't want it, but I absolutely don't forget what it felt like and how low it took me, because I'm present for my life today. And I'm a really very, very present father. And I'm a single dad. So I'm a single dad with 3 kids. I mean, I share custody with their mom, but I'm super present today. And so I have to remember how bad it was. And that's one of the things that helps keep me healthy.
I think you said 13 years, but how long have you been in recovery?
That's right. It's actually, I celebrated 13 years on October 12th. So
Okay.
I got sober on October 12th, 2007. And my oldest son was born on January 14th, 2008. I got sober 92 days before he was born.
Someone asked, do you drink?
I do not. No. I don't do anything. Well, I mean, that's a lie. But I don't drink. I don't do drugs. When I don't think I was a problem drinker. I don't think I drank alcoholically. But when I got sober in 2007, as I mentioned, I decided to not do anything. So I haven't had a drink or a drug in 13 years. And it works for me.
Do you have to participate in some support activities like AA to keep on track?
That's an interesting phrased question. Do I have to participate in some support activities like AA to keep on track? I don't have to, but I do. And it's they say in AA, you come for the drinking, you stay for the thinking. And what they mean by that is, in many ways, getting sober I mean, don't mean to minimize how challenging it is, but getting sober is the easy part. Figuring out, why you were there in the first place is the hard part. And so I am very involved in a 12-step program, AA, and I sponsor people. I work with people. It's helps keep me human, And it doesn't mean that I don't have my flaws, because Lord knows I do. But I'm very aware of my behavior. I'm very aware of if I'm treating someone unfairly, whether it be a kid, a random person, that cuts me off on the road, or someone in my professional life. And it just reminds me to just kind of like keep my stuff together, and stay healthy, and be accountable for my own actions and behaviors, and don't blame people for things. And so for me, it just helps me think straight.
Another question was, what help did you have when you decided it was enough?
That's a really great question, and I'm glad you asked that. Whomever asked that, thank you for asking that. I am blessed, I'm really blessed because I had an unbelievably loving and supporting family, and group of friends that stepped up and did everything they could to try to help me. So just a couple of things on this. I did not go to rehab. I went to my Jewish mother's house in Baltimore, which is like a whole movie in and of itself, because what the Jewish mom, like, she fed me and she held me and she told me how handsome I was. She did Jewish mom stuff, and but it was amazing, and I needed it. And I left. I would go down in Baltimore for a 2-week period. Sorry, there's like fuzz. And I would probably gain 5 pounds in the time that I was down there, because there were turkey sandwiches and matzo ball soup and all this stuff. And my mother showed, I have an amazing relationship with my mother and always have. I am what many people would say, call a mama's boy. I've never seen such grace and strength from her before in my life, to sit there and look at, I was 35 years old, by the way. I was a grown man about to be a father, and she just was like unbelievably strong. I have so much gratitude for her. My family was amazing, and I'm really grateful for that. Not everybody has that luxury. But I think it's important to say, I wasn't going to get sober unless I wanted to get sober, and no one was going to get me sober, except for me. So there was support. But if you know anyone that might be struggling, I think, and Shara, you may have an opinion on this as well, but my belief is they're just not going to do it until they're ready to do it. And I was ready, and I'm really unbelievably blessed to have such a loving and supportive family.
We have another question. Have you had to navigate folks in some recovery rooms claiming you are violating the anonymity in press, radio, and film tradition? I absolutely don't think you are. More curious about your experience.
Wow, that's an amazing, amazing question. So thank you. Who asked that?
Rena.
Rena, that's an incredible question. And by the way, Rena, I won't put you on the spot and ask you to take yourself off of mute, but the stormtrooper artwork happening behind you is the most amazing thing. And if my children were here right now watching this, that's all they would care about and be talking about.
Oh, I care about too. There you go.
Yeah, no, super, super, super cool. That's a really good question. Thank you so much for asking that. I struggled a little bit. I appreciate you saying that. I don't think I'm breaking that tradition either. What I say is I'm in a 12-step recovery program. I generally try to speak as broadly as possible about recovery. I did mention my first ever AA meeting in the book. My agent, who also happens to be a beautiful writer. So my friend and agent is a guy named Bill Clegg, and Bill is a brilliant writer and has also written about his recovery. He was a crack addict, and to see him, you would just be like, no way. But he was. I talked to him about it, but I decided to do it. But no, I think I'm happy to be very vague, quite frankly. What I do when I'm asked about it is say, I think that there are many different paths to recovery. There's no one way to do it, and I truly believe that. All I can do, though, is talk about the way that has worked for me, and that is a 12-step program. And I usually stop there. I usually don't say AA, but there is no prescription, if you'll allow that, for recovery. And I know people that were opioid addicts that still drink, but no longer take the opioids. I know people that have used meditation and yoga as a form of treatment. I know people that have gone to therapy and continue to go to therapy, and there are lots of different ways. For me, the 12-step program was the path that I'm on, and has really helped give me my life back and save my life. But I do everything I can to respect the traditions of AA.
We have one last question. At what point when you're dating do you share your story, and have most women been accepting or some not?
I mean, I'm like a built-in designated driver. So if nothing else, I'm good. Have at it, because I'm not going to be drinking. I'm very comfortable with who I am, and I'm very comfortable being an addict in recovery. And I'm really proud of the fact that I'm able to be here today and share my story with you, and that I was able to write the book and share the story. And so I have found that look, people always judge, and people can say whatever they want. I have found that there are people that get it, and there are people that don't get it. There are people that are like, whoa, are you about to go off and do a lot of drugs? I mean, what I find, quite frankly, is that I'm healthier than 80% of the people, walking around. So people are generally really accepting. I have interesting, fun, nutty stories also, I mean, so if nothing else, I'm fun at a party. But specifically with respect to dating, no, people are really sweet and very kind and understanding. And if they're not, that's fine. They don't need to kind of be in my orbit, But I mean, it goes, just to go back. I know we want to wrap up, but will just to bring it back to, because it's incredibly important. I think not as important as my dating life, but it's incredibly important. I think to just sort of touch on the stigma one more time. I think. This is, people judge as if you have no willpower. right? It's like some vision of the 50s of some alcoholic in a trench coat, like stumbling off of the train, the commuter train, and you know, mothers clutching their children and you know, rushing away, and like, oh, there's the town drunk. It's a very different way of looking at it and thinking about it, and it's an illness, and I am in recovery. You know, that's why we use the word recovery. Like I'm in recovery. I'm not recovered, but I'm in recovery, and the stigma is very real. And so if you take anything away from this discussion tonight, if I could be so bold as to ask, like, please try to remember that this isn't people sort of defying you. This isn't people defying societal norms. This is a real affliction, and it happens to be an incredibly powerful one. And so I, you know, I'm really blessed to be here today. And I would just say, like, when I was an active addict, there were so many little things that I could not bring myself to do. Normal, mundane things that folks like you maybe just sort of take for granted. Basic stuff: opening the mail, changing a light bulb that's been burnt out, emptying, unloading and loading the dishwasher, bathing, you know, really basic things, you know, taking the recycling out, that I just could never bring myself to do. And mail would pile up, and light bulbs wouldn't get changed, and the dishwasher wouldn't get loaded or unloaded. And you know, I did my best to bathe, but surely I would have skipped a day or two here and there. I do all of those things today, and for as mundane as they are, every time I do those things, this is 13 years later, every time I do those things, I take a second and I feel really good about myself for doing those things. The little tasks I celebrate as small victories still today, because it is very difficult to find your way out of addiction. And I am, as I've said many times, and I can't think of a better way to wrap up, I'm so tremendously grateful for the fact that I'm here to take out the recycling and load and unload the dishwasher and fold my kids' laundry and do all of those things, that I do it happily every chance I can get, because I'm so grateful. And obviously I'm equally as grateful to all of you for having me here tonight. Thank you so much.
And we're thankful you could be here tonight to share your story and, you know, write this book that will hopefully give others hope, like the books that you read. And thank you everyone for being here this evening. If we want to wave, give a round of applause to Dan for being here with us tonight from New York. And so hopefully we'll see you at some of our future events. But Dan, again, thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. Stay
Have a good
safe.
night. Stay
Bye
safe.
now.